As a boy, I always liked to climb. Higher and higher, as high as possible, in fact. I'd climb anything. Trees, anything. When you're 15 meters above the ground and you look down, I love it. I love feeling that sensation, the rush, even if you mess up sometimes. But I love it. I really feel good when I'm climbing up a ladder. I feel very comfortable with heights. I don't even know what vertigo feels like. I took the equipment, I put it together right on the edge of the roof, and then, at that moment, the ladder, instead of falling like that, it went like this. And then suddenly I screamed. I yelled. I don't think I've ever yelled that loud in my life. And the whole time I was thinking, this is it. I was really frightened, terrified, absolutely terrified. And once I'd hit the floor, I was okay. I was shaken up, but I remember thinking, well, you're not dead. The fall did not kill Henri Lemaitre. Only after his stay at the hospital did his life become endangered. Infectious diseases are the most common cause of deaths worldwide. In Germany alone, 15,000 people die annually by being infected with resistant bacteria in hospitals. In France, the number is double. We're facing an antibiotics crisis. We're certainly losing at least 1/3 of our intensive care patients due to infections. Henri Lemaitre was more than fortunate. By chance, he survives a fall from a 5-story house. He spends the next few weeks in an artificial coma and then endures countless surgeries. And I woke up about a month and a half later in an odd state, really thin and pale. I'd lost 35 kilos. And the surgeon was there who'd managed to fix things here and there and everywhere. Well, all the fractures, they were everywhere. I began to become a little more aware of my surroundings. I was able to talk with the surgeon. He explained to me, everything has been patched up nicely. Some things have been fixed quite neatly, but you have a problem in both your feet. And finally, the surgeon said to me, we've used a lot of different antibiotics. At the moment, we're trying one last one, and we have to cross our fingers and pray that the microbes will be fought off by them. And I could see that my left foot was healing up nicely, but my right foot was just getting worse and worse. Henri Lemaitre was infected with Staphylococcus aureus, the so-called golden staph. In the last 10 years, the incorrect application of antibiotics has doubled the number of multi-resistant bacteria. Officially, at least 35,000 people are infected with golden staph annually in Germany, although the actual number is assumed to be much higher. In hospitals, antibiotics are prescribed very generously because of the large amount and variety of critically ill patients. This is where people develop their resistance, the bacteria's resistance to antibiotics. The so-called golden staph is a resistant staphylococcus. Technically, we have all some resistance, but when the staphylococcus enters a wound in the hospital, it can cause enormous problems because there is a very limited amount of effective antibiotics currently available to combat this complication. On the one hand, bacteria are essential organisms for our survival. On the other, bacteria are dangerous germs. Bacteria reproduce very quickly. Their numbers can double in 20 minutes. Antibiotics are their enemies. For a long time, the pathogens had no chance against these chemical miracle weapons. However, the number of bacteria striking back is constantly increasing. Some simply close their pores, blocking the way for the antibiotics. Others attack their enemy when it's already inside. Using specific pumps, they can eliminate the antibiotic before it affects them. caused by a genotype mutation, the defense strategy evolves coincidentally. These mistakes allow resistant bacteria to continue reproducing, regardless of the antibiotics. After several months in the hospital and more than 20 operations, Henri Lemaitre returns home to the south of France. Since antibiotics no longer affect his body and the wound on his foot is not healing, he must do his best to keep the lesion sterile. To do this, he uses the so-called Pepino Method, which was developed before the discovery of antibiotics. The wound is being cleaned and bandaged several times a day. Even though this method sounds harmless, Henri's situation is precarious. If his foot does not heal, it will have to be amputated. It's hard work. It's 3 hours worth a day, morning, afternoon and night. And I can't afford to go without doing it before bed. At night I have to sleep with a brand new, clean dressing. That's the whole point of the Pepino Method, to ensure that the staphylococcus and the infection doesn't work its way up my leg. Because as long as it's still localized within the wound, it's okay, it's still manageable. But if it begins to attack my bones, or if it gets into the blood, I'm a dead man. So like the surgeon told me, if it begins to itch in your leg, you come to me straight away. You get on any bus, any train, any plane even, you just come to me. Because they'd have to intervene straight away to stop it from going any further. Because, I mean, after that it's my whole leg. You're looking at death or the loss of a leg. And it's happened quite a bit. So you have to be very, very careful. I'm no longer on antibiotics because I was asked to stop taking them, to be weaned off them. So I have to be extremely careful. In the months after his operations, Henri Lemaitre starts looking for alternative healing methods to help save his leg. He finally succeeds in Paris. Scientists from all over the world are meeting here at the Institut Pasteur to consult about the global antibiotic crisis. Alongside French microbiologists and doctors, the Congress also hosts a group of scientists from Georgia who are presenting their long experiences with the so-called Bacterial Farsh, an alternative therapy to antibiotics that is attracting more and more attention.
We are studying phages, we're producing phage preparations. We have the diagnostic clinics, which says, will the phages work or not?
The advantage and the disadvantage of phages is that they're so specific. You know, anybody who's taken antibiotics knows that it's likely to mess up their gut and in various ways cause problems, and a lot of people have allergies and various things like that.
During his Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1945, Alexander Fleming, the inventor of penicillin, predicted that pathogenic bacteria will develop resistance to antibiotics. Average life expectancy increased by 10 years in the past century, thus significantly changing life in Western Europe. With the help of antibiotics, it was possible to finally exterminate fatal infectious diseases like pneumonia, syphilis, and scarlet fever. The battle against bacteria seemed to be over, and thereupon many pharmaceutical manufacturers cancelled their research on infectious diseases. The first impregnable staphylococci appeared in the late 1990s. The weapon protecting people from deadly bacteria over the past decades was losing power. Dr. Dublanchet is a retired microbiologist who treats patients with infectious, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. When Henri Lemaitre asks him for help, the scientist is unsure whether he can treat this difficult case. The only medical alternatives he can think of are Bacterial Farsh, a therapy he has been interested in for some time. This was an infected patient who, after many failed attempts using antibiotic treatments, was told the only option was amputation. He asked me, "Is there anything you can do for me?" I said, maybe we can do something. I was very careful because he was in such a catastrophic situation. He had an impressive infection in his foot after falling off a roof. Many fractures, one of which is a Staphylococcus aureus nosocomial infection. The foot had been festering for months and was unable to be treated. It became so bad that the surgeons told him, "The severity of your condition means we only have one option, amputation." At the time, I was working with Bacterial Farsh from eastern countries, and I knew these were efficient and of good quality. Farsh are viruses that attack and kill bacteria, but not the person carrying them. If applied properly, the so-called bacteria glutons reproduce on the infected spot until no germs are left. Phages are viruses that attack and kill bacteria, but not the person carrying them. If applied properly, the so-called bacteria glutons reproduce on the infected spot until no germs are left. They specifically attach themselves to the bacterium and inject their own genetic material. The victim is thereby transformed into a phage's manufacturer. Finally, it bursts and ejects hundreds of new viruses that are constantly on the prowl. When there are no suitable hosts left, the phages are excreted by the body. Dr. Dublanchet wants to know more about this therapy. In a search for a cure for his patient's persistent germs, he and his colleague, infectious specialist Dr. Olivier Paté, traveled to Georgia, a small, war-torn country southwest of Russia. We also hope to see practical usage on patients, for instance in the setting of a phagotherapy clinic. Georgia is where phages therapy originated. During the Second World War, with the support of Stalin, Georgian scientists built the Eliana Institute, where millions of patients were treated and saved. People are queuing in front of the diagnostic center at the Eliana Institute, waiting to be examined. We haven't tried the phages treatment yet. Until now, she was treated with antibiotics. Now I want to try the phages. This used to be the best institute in the world, and now it's close to its downfall. Thank God it's still running. First of all, each patient's bacteria is analyzed before deciding on further treatment. Frequent and long antibiotic treatments cause side effects and sometimes do not lead to the desired result. This is when phages are the only solution, because they are a more effective treatment. The analysis of the bacteria is done on the spot. If the germ is already known to the institute, the patient can pick up his antidote for Bacterial Farsh on location at the in-house pharmacy. In Georgia, phages are a standard remedy for almost every disease. For example, in the case of an inflammation of the throat, one uses this ampoule 3 times a day. After eating, one cleans the mouth with soda water or a chamomile tincture. Then, using a syringe, liquid is directly sprayed into the throat. It's important to keep the liquid in the throat for some time. It's harmless and can be swallowed afterwards. Furthermore, it's also very healthy for the gastrointestinal tract. This treatment needs to proceed for at least 10 days, with a maximum of 20 days. It really does help, and it's the best alternative to antibiotics. It's true that I forgot to say, perhaps out of courtesy for our Eastern colleagues, indeed I forgot to say that we don't overly trust the quality of these products, the pharmaceutical ones in particular, the ones that come from the Eastern countries. The French doctors are very interested in this method and Henri Lemet's therapy. They are allowed to watch while chief physician, Dr. Gavsiala, examines a patient with an infection. The wound is inflamed, dangerously so, after antibiotics stopped working.
We just wash with the phage the wound and put the gas with the phage in it. So it will work for a few hours, and it's about 8 o'clock maybe we'll change it.
Well, with healing time just a matter of days, this therapy could be very interesting. During the Cold War, millions of people were treated this way because there was no access to antibiotics. The therapy became routine in the Soviet Union, and knowledge about phage was a regular part of medical training. However, documenting the effectiveness of this method with medical studies was not required during communist times. Therefore, for this reason and some others, phage therapy is still considered unreliable in the West, even though it is still used frequently in some other parts of the world. This afternoon I witnessed something particularly interesting. It's the use of Bacterial Farsh by a recent generation of doctors. The doctor that we saw was around 30 years of age and treats his patients with Bacterial Farsh made in the same way that they were 70 or 80 years ago, which is quite surprising. During the First World War, phages were first discovered by a Canadian, Félix Derel. Back then, humanity was almost defenseless against bacteria. Antibiotics were not yet developed. Phages therapy was very popular in Europe and the USA between the 1920s and 1940s. Even the big pharmaceutical manufacturers were producing phages. Together with Georgi Eliava, Derel founded the Eliana Institute in Tbilisi during the Second World War. Today, the institute looks back on 80 years of success. Separated from Western medicine, phages became the alternative for antibiotics in the Soviet Union. The former director of the institute remembers better times. Imagine this. In 1988, we produced 490,000 phages pills against dysentery. 490,000 pills. And one pill contained 25 milliliters of phages solution. We produced 485,000 pills of phages against typhus and 60,000 pills against salmonella. The amount of phages produced by us was enormous. Tons of it. But since the downfall of the Soviet Union, those glorious times are over. The Institute lacks money for research or renovation. What can I do for my foot? What can I do now that They've tried everything. If Dr. Dublanchet is able to bring back phages from Georgia, well, then I can try this very last option of treatment. And if not, then never mind, it's coming off. In any case, I've had enough. Can't do this anymore.
L'amputation, c'est la catastrophe. C'est la plus grosse de mes peurs.
Amputation is the worst case scenario.
Ça veut dire que...
It's my biggest fear.
En gros, je sais pas, mais c'est presque le suicide.
It means that... Basically, I don't know, but it's like suicide to me. I don't know, to me it's unthinkable. It's my job, it's my sentimental life, it's my life with my kid. It's all my passions gone out the window. Basically, all I'd have left is music and maybe reading. But how will I live as well? How will I live, even when I wake up at night? Wondering if my foot is still there. I actually reach out to feel that it's still there, I have nightmares and I wake up in a cold sweat. But then I see that it is still there, that it is still painful and that it has to work, it just has to work.
Il faut que ça marche, il faut que ça marche.
In Georgia, the French doctors are interested in viewing the laboratories. They've already got to know the scientists during the conference in Paris.
You will see now the laboratories are more or less renovated, while the general infrastructure was in a disaster. We started to renovate the general infrastructure last 3-4 years.
Yes.
If you see such an electricity boxes somewhere in Europe, we will be killed, or like that, for instance. I'll be immediately arrested in France for being a director of this stuff.
The French doctors want to know as much as possible about the production and use of phages. Alongside Henri Lemaitre, there are many other patients not responding to antibiotics anymore.
You are absolutely right, because the resistance is more and more widespread, even here.
For some outbreak, like cholera, I think it's a good indication in some countries.
Not
in France.
Here it's easier because you can use it locally. And people are more used to, people in the Soviet times, they knew the phage. Then in the 90s, they forget.
Until the 1990s and the breakup of the Soviet Union, more than 1,200 people worked at the Eliana Institute. They researched phages on behalf of the whole Eastern Bloc. Today, there are only 70 workers left. During the political upheaval of the Soviet Union, the unique phages collection was particularly at risk.
These guys, by the way, who are working here, they are heroes, because there were days, especially in winter, when for days and weeks there was no electricity, and they were taking the phage collections, the parts of the phage collection, taking to their homes and keeping their house refrigerators to keep them alive. And that worked. Big part of the collection was lost, certainly, but they managed to keep very substantial and most important phages and bacterial strains.
During these political changes, many Soviet scientists and doctors tried their luck in Europe. One of them was the Georgian doctor, a surgeon named Noda Danielia.
I
always thought phages therapy was the normal way to fight germs, but when I arrived here, nobody was using phages. I was very surprised to see this.
Keine Phagen gesehen. Und ich war sehr erstaunt. Warum denn nicht?
Dr. Danielia applied to Dr. Pol Myer, chief physician of the cardiac and vascular department at the medical university in the German town of Hanover. The latter is familiar with resistance to antibiotics, but has nevertheless never heard of bacteriophages therapy before. He came to me with a suitcase, almost like a salesman who carries different products in a case. Inside, he had several little glass bottles of pharges. But of course, you couldn't see anything, they were just clear solutions.
Ja, das sind die Monostaph-Phagen.
Even though Dr. Pol Myer is interested in finding an alternative to antibiotic treatment, he does not quite trust the mysterious liquids. I think it would be natural to be skeptical, especially upon hearing that these are viruses. Viruses are, in general, something a medic should have respect for, because there are only very few treatment methods. Unfortunately, antibiotics that can treat a large variety of viruses do not exist. After receiving astonishing results from laboratory tests, Dr. Pol Myer starts including pharges into his daily work at the clinic. And he works closely with Noda Danielia and his Georgian pharges. One day, the clinic draws the attention of the public authorities, which causes an abrupt end to the project.
Wir haben das mit großem Enthusiasmus auch im Rahmen einer Pilotstudie.
We were working on this with great enthusiasm within a pilot study, together with our colleague from plastic surgery,
Mit offenen Wunden, Problemwunden und so weiter zu
who
tun haben.
also has to deal a lot with open wounds and the resulting
Ganz
problems.
begeistert von der initialen Erfahrung und hätten das auch
We were
gerne
very
weiter
thrilled about the
verfolgt.
initial
Dann muss man
experience
sagen, ist
and would have liked very much to carry on.
sagen wir mal, das Problem, was sich dann entwickelt hat, war tatsächlich eins.
But the problem
eine
developing
größere
from
Studie,
this
die
was that we
notwendig
needed a
wäre,
bigger study.
tatsächlich zu finanzieren. Und dann hat es tatsächlich auch im Krankenhaus eben gewisse rechtliche Bedenken.
Financing a big study for a legally not approved product caused doubts in the clinic, and therefore the project stagnated.
Und darüber hinaus ist dieses Projekt ins Stocken geraten.
At the Robert Koch Institute in Berlin, Professor Wolfgang Witter has been researching Staphylococci for over 33 years. He still remembers the time after the upheaval in the Eastern Bloc.
Wir sind eigentlich eher lose kontaktiert worden von Ärzten.
We had informal contact with doctors from the former Soviet Union, with whom we were dealing about introducing phage therapy into Germany. They showed us their results and asked for our opinions.
Unsere Meinung war, dass es sich bei den Fällen, die sie vorgestellt
Our
haben,
impression was that the cases they presented were rather anecdotal reports. First of all, we needed a proper clinical comparative study to see the real impact of the phage therapy on a scientific basis. In order to get the phage therapy accepted as a medicine in Europe, just like with every other medical product, requires a lot of money. About 10 million euros are needed for the study of only one specific phage, treating one specific bacterium. But pharmaceutical corporations only invest in a product promising financial profit, an unpredictable factor in phage therapy. Belgian doctor Ludo Hazen is one of the researchers who, despite a strong belief in the phage therapy, has failed because of the complicated restrictions of the regulatory authorities. For 2 years, he and his partner were looking for investors who would finance the necessary studies of their company, Phage Tech, but in vain.
They were very interested, but they immediately always ask about IP protection. And with phages, to get strong, rock solid, watertight protection of intellectual property is very difficult, is complex. And the second question they ask, have you proven that it works in patients? And then the answer is no. There have been case reports, but there has not been a single well-designed clinical trial according to Western standards that has proved that phages are effective in treating bacterial infections in men. So then investors will tell you, well, come back as soon as you get the data, and then we'll think of investing.
What seems impossible in Europe is no problem in Georgia. Daily practice replaces scientific studies. Even children are being treated with pharges. 8-year-old Salome has been a patient of the ophthalmic clinic in Tbilisi, where her ophthalmitis has been treated with Bacterial Farsh since she was a small child. Her eyes were swollen and tearing constantly. There was a secretion coming from her right eye. When we first came here for examination, doctors immediately suggested trying pharges. The eyes were being washed with pharges. They first wanted to see what kind of results this might have, and then started the therapy. Most of the time, the left eye was affected more. Only rarely did she have problems with both eyes. One of the professors is giving a lecture in the clinic. The main aspect is to learn the treatment with pharges. Using Salome's case as an example, the students come to know the pharges therapy. Come here, Salome. Should I sit down? Yes. Salome is our patient. You can ask her whatever you want. What are you using to treat your eye? Bacterial Farsh. Ever since being treated with pharges, Salome has had no problems with her eyes. She used the liquid several times a day, and after a short time, a positive result was already visible. For the past couple of years, her eyes have been in a healthy state. Today, she doesn't need the pharges anymore, but prophylactic use does not do her any harm. The pharges don't have any side effects, do they? Once you fully understand the process, you will see that pharges do no harm to the organism and have no side effects. Thank you, Salome. There is an old saying in Georgia, "My enemy's enemy is my friend." The saying might apply to the world of microbes, too. This is why the doctors at the Eliana Institute collect the pharges in a place full of germs. The dirty waters of the river Kura are an ideal source for the collection of pharges. The dirtier the water, the higher chance of finding many different bacteria and matching pharges. Here is where they hope to find a bacteria farge for Henri Lemaitre's resistant bacteria. In the laboratory, researchers try to find the matching phage for the new bacterium. The germs in the Petri dishes are being lightly covered with the viruses that were isolated out of the dirty river waters. If by coincidence the virus kills the bacteria, the team examines the phage further in order to be sure that it really is the matching part for the virus.
Can you explain for me this? You put the E. coli strain, E. coli strain, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And
with
one drop and put here on the media.
Okay.
And after several minutes, when it will be dry, you can drop different phages.
Dr. de Blanchet brought some of his patients' bacteria with him in order to find the matching phage. The laboratory tests take several hours. until the scientists can tell for sure that the phages are reacting with a given germ. Therefore, we are testing whether we can treat the bacteria we get from the clinic without phages. Depending on how active and versatile a type of phage is, we decide to breed it. The breeding process takes several days. Every phage is growing on 5 different bacterial strains, while simultaneously being tested. After 24 hours, one can already see results. The liquid treated with phage is clear compared to the untreated sample. All the bacteria are eliminated. This is a phage to treat the Proteus bacterium and the untreated sample. One can clearly see the difference. The Georgian scientists have an archive of phage that match known bacteria. They only have to breed if they receive an unknown germ. It's true that the process seems to me to be particularly archaic, elementary and not very safe considering the manufacturing process really does not meet the standards of fabrication in modern countries. But it doesn't shock me, it doesn't surprise me, and I think that it is perfectly possible to envisage that I myself would be prepared to use it if I had the opportunity to, of course. So no surprises, apart from maybe a little disappointment in the way that it is made. But I think the main thing, first and foremost, is to get better and heal. For over 30 years, Dr. Rudi Lutz of the Max Planck Institute in Berlin has been researching in the field of electro-microscopic molecular genetics of bacteriophage. He is one of the few scientists who understands the different phages from scratch, and at the same time remains skeptical of using phages in human medicine. The Georgians are using this method out of desperation, because they have no access to antibiotics. There are still a lot of issues to solve before one can actually use phages routinely. It is a question of how to apply phages properly, how constant the impact is, and how efficient the cleaning processes are. The effort of getting a clean phage without any additional dirt is enormous. This is very laborious for a medical product. Especially when treating people, one must pay attention because the body develops antibodies to practically everything, including to the phages themselves. This is why applications are already limited in this field. The bacteriophage are being classified in 2 types, virulent and temperate. While one can foresee the effect of virulent phage, the temperate type is able to change and carry genes of the germs. Therefore, they are inapplicable for human medicine. As usual, the phage infects the bacteria with its own DNA, initiating fast reproduction inside the bacteria. Temperate phages, however, can take pieces of the deadly bacteria's genetic material with them before attacking the next enemy. In this way, the temperate phages can carry resistant or diseased genetic material to other bacteria. Unintentionally, they become accomplices in the war against antibiotics. The risk of temperate phages is well known in Georgia, but based on their long experience, the scientists can differentiate between virulent and temperate phages despite the simple manual production. Finally, one of the virulent phages can be handed over by Dr. Alawidze to cure Henri Lemet's resistant germ. We checked the activity of the given bacterial strain and combined it with several phages. It occurred that all the phages were effective. Therefore, we chose the culture with the strongest impact to breed a new series.
Boxes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Finally, the French doctors received the prepared phages solution from Dr. Alawidze. Now they have to illegally smuggle the medicine over the French border. In fact, Farsh's therapy is not totally impossible in Europe. The Centre for Burn Victims in the military hospital at Brussels has been using Georgian Farshes on a daily basis for many years. It is the only hospital in Europe applying Farshes. However, for exceptional cases and under certain restrictions. When it comes to serious cases, surgeon Dr. Thomas Rose applies the law of the Helsinki Protocol.
Helsinki Protocol, das heißt eigentlich, dass man anzeigen
The Helsinki Protocol basically means that one has tried all the traditional treatments with a patient, but the patient is not responding to any of them satisfactorily. In that case, one can suggest alternative treatments to the patient. In our case, it is the application of a mixture or a cocktail of Farshes. The cocktail is then used on the infected parts. Here, the patient is a woman with severe burns who has been operated on several times and who is no longer responding to antibiotics. Due to the extreme danger of infection, this is a matter of life and death. But still, Farshes are only used in addition to antibiotics.
Also es ist eine Kombinationstherapie und meine
This is a combined therapy.
Unsere Idee von unserem Labor aus ist
an idea we had in our laboratory.
Dieses Bakterium so
the Farsh weakens the bacterium to the point where the antibiotic can gain impact and overcome the resistance.
Dieses Bakterium einwirken kann und damit diese Resistenz überwindet.
We saw the number of bacteria decrease, which demonstrates the efficiency of this method. So here are these famous Bacterial Farsh that I brought in without any problems, without a prescription. I took them in my luggage, without taking any particular precautions. I've got some reserves too. Dr. Dublanchet wants to try out the Farshes with his patient. At Henri Lemaitr's own risk, they start the treatment at the clinic of Dr. Paté. How are you? Well, a bit better. Better than last time or as good as last time? Any more pain? By better, I mean not as good as last time. I'm taking so long, like we said it would. It's so slow a process. When I changed the dressings, recently it was odd because I could feel the cold. I hadn't been able to feel anything in that area for 4 years. Well, that is because the nerves are growing back and the wound is scarring. This is excellent news. Good. Well, listen, we'll put a little bit of the Bacterial Farsh solution onto the wound. I think you know how this works by now. It's completely painless. Look, even the skin looks good. What I'm defending is the urgency to use options to get out of a troublesome situation, and I use this term lightly. Troublesome situations for some patients, these situations are catastrophic. This is why I have allowed myself, by following my own personal ethics on medicine, why I'm choosing to use Bacterial Farsh and phagotherapy, even before the studies are concluded.
L'utilisation de bactériophage et de phagothérapie.
3 months have passed since Dr. Dublanchet applied the Georgian Farshes on Henri Lemaitre. The treatment was a high risk, forcing doctor and patient into a legal limbo. But the risk was worth it. The first positive results are already visible.
Aujourd'hui, on vient de faire cette dernière expérience.
Today is my last treatment. The wound has been clean for 2 weeks now. It is not a constant state, though, and I cannot say how it's going to be. But there are positive signs that make me believe that my leg will heal. Of course, they have to transplant new bones, and they have never done that before. There is now a huge hole. It will still be a very long process. But it was the first time that they made a smear test without detecting any staphylococci. The first time I'm free of germs in the past 4 years.
C'est la première fois depuis 4 ans. Le traumatisme est encore un peu là, mais on va dire que du fait...
The trauma is still there. I'm still dealing with that. But I can say that just the fact that the wound has closed up and that everything is going well for the moment, I'm eating well, I'm full of energy. I'm not saying that I'm completely clear, but I mean, I'm forgetting about it, slowly but surely. Well, now it seems to be nice and dry. It's not weeping at all anymore. So once we've checked that there is nothing there, we will finally be able to completely close up this foot. It will still, unfortunately, have this curve in it, but... Well, actually, I'm surprised by this change. It's quite spectacular when you think back to the way it was. We've had no problems, no recurrence of anything. Things have gone according to plan right up to today. A hospital in the outskirts of Paris, specialized in amputations, experiences extreme problems with the antibiotic crisis. This is where patients whose infections are not healing are being hospitalized and often have to face radical surgery. Dr. Dublanchet and Dr. Paté came to present the results of their visit in Georgia and their study with Henri Lemaitre. A successful alternative to antibiotics would be a vast change for the hospitalized patients of this clinic. We have a large proportion of infections with multi-resistant bacteria, or MRBs, and sometimes we come across situations where treatment with antibiotics repeatedly fails, and sometimes we have to turn towards a surgical solution to the problem. So yes, these treatments do sometimes fail. This is where Bacterial Farsh could eventually provide us with some help, because instead of putting our patients under the knife again, we could perhaps use these pharges, and subsequently the number of surgical interventions might decrease, because it is more often than not something that is not disastrous but very penalizing for the patient.
Bei den Phagen ist es ja nun so, dass ein Prinzip auf gar keinen Fall.
The problem with pharges is that we will never be able to have just one or two pharges that were successful in the laboratory tests, and that can be produced long-term. This is not the way it works. Bacteria change all the time. Germs change. One would have to adjust a product like this all the time. Despite these obstacles, the Dutch pharmaceutical corporation Micrios did exactly that. They developed a Farsh with an exceptionally broad impact on MRSA that is able to eliminate all related strains. The company strongly believes that this medication will be applicable for decades. In contrast to the Georgians, who take their time treating each bacterium individually, Micrios acts according to the market conditions of the capitalist system.
Der Unterschied ist der, dass wir
The difference is that we try to find pharges that can treat as many strains as possible, while the Georgians are quite fast in finding a Farsh that will solve the individual problem of the patient. We cannot do this because it is not the way products are made in the West. Therefore, we have to be sure to have a product that can be used for a wide range of problems.
Darum muss man sorgen, dass das Produkt, das man macht, von Anfang an sehr brauchbar ist.
Pharges will be sold both as a cosmetic product and a treatment to fight MRSA. It will soon be on the market because the corporation chose a different way to legalize the product, since they too lack a scientific study.
It's going to be a whole array of different products, so different products have different registration routes. We found several ones that are actually easier and quicker, which I cannot disclose yet, but will become evident in the course of this year when we launch these products.
If the corporation will keep their promises, they will be the first to get pharges through the complicated net of Western European medication regulations. This is a big opportunity for people suffering from MRSA in Europe, people sharing the fate of Henri Lemaitre.
Yeah, Sabato! Ah, je dois bien avouer que
I have to admit that I had lost all hope. I couldn't believe in it anymore. It was completely hopeless. I could only dream of getting out of this, so after phagotherapy, this was after all the last options, so I tried to believe in it a little. And then when we suddenly discovered that there was no Staphylococcus present after 2 months, it was a dream that I didn't even dare to dream anymore. It was like winning the lottery. You never think it'll happen to you. And then when we concluded that there was still no Staphylococcus aureus, and still none 2 months after, I began to realize that I'd won the fight. It is still unclear whether pharges can establish themselves as a mass product. What we can be sure of, however, is that thanks to this individual therapy, Henri Lemaitre was able to keep his leg. The risk of amputation has now been lifted, thanks to a Soviet-era virus.